Back here on the microphones, Learn English 232 with my brother Ad, and this is going to be a good one, Ad, again.
Yep, episode 3. We're trying new things every week. Still the same format, more or less, but we're going to have a little bit of a dialogue at some point about learning English, but we like to talk a little bit first before getting into it.
We're going to have a little bit of a chat. Thanks to everybody who commented. By the time this video is uploaded, I will have commented back to everybody. We do appreciate that. Thanks for liking and subscribing, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm going to talk about the topic first, just to give you an idea. And then we're going to circle back a little bit to what's going on and then nail the dialogue kind of thing. So the topic is Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, sort of a semi-modern thing, certainly more modern than when we were making the last podcasts. And by the way, if you are listening to this on as a podcast and not on YouTube, please check us out, learnenglish232.com on YouTube.
Yeah, so you can see us sitting on the couch. I think that's the whole thing. So it's the audio plus a little bit of visuals on the couch, I guess, hanging out.
We've caught up to I don't know. We're at least within the most recent 10 to 20 years. And Ad and I were just talking about, are we always going to be kind of two goofs sitting on a couch? And the answer is no. I'm thinking we go to the great outdoors next week, although I haven't thought of the podcast or the topic yet to make it a little more interesting. Or this will be interesting, but to give it some more variety, Ad.
Well, that sounds interesting. We actually have a family cottage. Our parents were just there to check on it. It's not exactly in the best condition. We have a lot of work to do, but that would actually be a great spot for a visual podcast.
And we will, yeah. It's up in cottage country here on a lake. So you got a beautiful lake, these cottages you go to in the summer. It does need some work. The thing is, after a long Canadian winter, you always wonder what's it going to be like at the cottage in the spring, because there's so much snow and no one looks after the house all year. So you go up and you think, is it going to still be there? Did it burn down somehow? Did animals get in? Did the roof collapse because of the snow? You really don't know, and it's always something. You got to get the water running again. You have to, do a bunch of stuff, but they said it was good, so that's good.
Yeah, because it's an old style cottage where there's no foundation, so there's no concrete and it doesn't stay. Basically, in the winter, things kind of shift around, lift up, and then hopefully by the time the spring comes, they settle back down and you still have your cottage.
Yeah, a lot of water freezing, thawing. Like I said, animals could get in or a tree could fall on it, although they've cut down trees. Anyway, we'll do that. But this podcast here, the interesting thing, we're taking a mini risk because we are in Ontario, Canada, in another lockdown where we're not supposed to go out of the house for anything other than work. So this is technically illegal, but I think the police, they're not going around door to door, but they wouldn't have much to say to this because this is work. We just show them, hey, look at Learn English 232. These guys are serious. But if we were just here having a conversation and lunch, it would technically be not allowed.
Yeah, so maybe we can go anywhere now. We can just bring our microphones and then just say we're working.
That's right. This is some serious work. And we probably wouldn't even have had to do the work. This is more pleasure than work for us. It is enjoyable. But I was going to say, if we had an early retirement, if we were early on getting Bitcoin, which we both were not, we thought about it in 2000, was it 11 or 12 or something, when it was $100 per coin, and then we didn't get it because it seemed silly. But now it still seems silly, kind of, but it's expensive.
I find everything seems silly though these days. Prices of everything seem pretty high. Governments are printing money, so it's hard to know really what anything is worth. And I'm confused about many things financially, I would say.
Yeah, we'll have to do another podcast about prices of everything. Like houses here have gone crazy. They're expensive more than before and going up on a percentage basis a lot. And we're just talking about, that kind of stuff. Money or the cottage, if we were going to sell the cottage or our parents were, it's probably twice as much as it would have been 3 years ago because people are sick of the city now and they're moving up to the lake to get away from society, governments, lockdowns. We're getting sick of it.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, you can't really get away from the government, I think, at the cottage, but it feels like you are on the lake. It's hard to
They're still there, but they're not. You don't see them all the time.
Yeah, I think if you're paddling in the canoe or on your dock, and it just feels like you're in nature, and it's a lot different than living in a city, that's for sure.
A little more laid back. Maybe we will because there's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about. Maybe we will um, do a little dialogue action here. What do you think? All right.
Looks like I'm starting here.
I gave you the first bit. Go.
Hey Andy, have you added any Bitcoin to your portfolio?
No, I missed the boat on that one. I remember contemplating it back in 2012 when it was around $100. I never pulled the trigger, and now it's almost 60K a coin.
I didn't get any either. It always felt like another Tulip mania to me. A lot of people are really bullish and think it will go to the moon. A lot of others think it will ultimately peter out and go down to zero. I was in the latter camp, but now I'm not so sure.
Short but sweet, loaded with terms. This is a true dialogue ad because this is literally what happened. We thought when we were in China, we thought, well, when it was $100 a coin, at that time you could make coins or mine them with a computer relatively easily. You just had to maybe spend a couple $1,000s on some type of computer, but the electricity was kind of expensive, but it was around the same price as a coin. And I thought, it's not going to stay at 100. That's too expensive because you can't just make some fake digital money and hope it's going to be expensive. But that turned out to be untrue, at least in terms of the current price.
Yeah, I'm still surprised every time I look at it. And that's why I'm surprised about how everything's going these days. So hard to really know what to do. And I'm sure with an international audience, we'll probably have some good perspectives on this because I know a lot of people in certain countries made a lot of money. I have some friends that made a lot of money having Bitcoins and told me actually the year that it was going to go up a few years ago when it went up like over, I don't know, 1,000 times easily. And then obviously went up a lot more since then.
Yeah, so that's a good point, Ad, also to mention where you're from, what you think of it, and did you get lucky or were you intelligent, if you want to say it that way? Did you have any good experience with it? And where do you think it's going to go ultimately? Is it still going to keep going up or not?
Or will you add it to your portfolio, which is the first term, and that's just a term used to describe someone's investments and usually stocks in the stock market. You could say something like, my portfolio is pretty risky. I have mostly stocks and hardly any cash.
Yeah, so it's sort of the basket of goods. You can imagine whatever investments you own, that collection is called a portfolio. If you're an artist, you could talk about a portfolio as sort of your collection of work. When else do you use it?
Yeah, mostly kind of a group of, it's mostly for artists, or if you're some kind of, you have something
A model. You
like a
could have
group of like something, like if you're, I know if you're a photographer, you'd have it. That's a certain kind of artist as well. If you're a designer, certainly.
A model, you could have all your
I think if you're like
clothes.
if you're an architect, you might have a portfolio of all the buildings you've designed before, but again, still design. So it's mostly designs of
And
some
it
sort.
and when you're talking with money, it sounds like you have more money when you're talking about a portfolio. It sounds like you have millions of dollars, even though it could be a very small one. But here's someone who's a little bit more modest and says, or you're talking about someone else, so it's not modest. You say he doesn't really have much of a portfolio at all. I think he only has about $20 in the bank. So that's not really a lot of investment there.
Well, in this case, I would say if it's only one thing, you usually don't describe that as a portfolio. It has to be normally at least two things, I would think.
Yeah, and probably more than that. Anyway, um, missed the boat. We probably talked about it years ago, but it's good to know. If you missed the boat, it means you missed an opportunity for something good. You had a chance, but you didn't do something in time. You could imagine physically if you got a boat ticket and you didn't get there in time and the boat leaves. Imagine if there's no airplanes and it's sailing across the ocean. That's your last chance. And you miss the boat. That would be pretty frustrating, Ed, because you can't go anymore because the boat's gone. You're not going to swim across the ocean.
Well, it's a lot worse if there's only one boat, too. If you have to wait overnight or if it's never coming again.
But I feel it's such an old term. That's what it used to be. You miss the boat, you miss your one and only chance.
Yeah, I think it was more at that time when people were moving over to a new continent, like maybe from Europe going to Canada. They missed the boat. Sorry, you're not going there anymore. You got to stay in Europe forever.
Yeah, it's not really like you miss the boat. I'll get the next one 3 minutes later. Anyway. I could say she had a chance to go on a free trip to Europe. She took too long to decide, and someone else took the spot. She's very disappointed that she missed the boat. Now, this is probably not a boat trip to Europe, it's probably on the plane, but the point is she missed the opportunity by being slow.
Yeah, it's even kind of worse if you miss the boat when you're contemplating getting on the boat. If you don't know that you were going to get on it, you don't even know about the boat, you're less worried about it. And you're like, oh, I found out later that I should have done something. So Andrew and I contemplated getting Bitcoin before, but we didn't. We thought about it. We were considering it, but we just didn't do it. So then you feel even a little bit worse because you were thinking about it. You almost did it, maybe, but you just didn't do it for some reason.
Yeah, you don't get any bonus points just for contemplating, but that means thinking about or considering something. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do this summer, but I'm contemplating a few ideas. It means I have a few ideas, I'm considering them, I'm thinking about I might do each one of them, but I'm not sure yet. So contemplating is thinking about or considering something, some options.
Right. So, and when you're contemplating or considering something, you may or may not pull the trigger. And this is just when you actually take action and take some opportunity. In this case, we did not take the opportunity or pull the trigger and buy any Bitcoin.
Very true, Ad. We did not. Yeah, we didn't. Like you can imagine with a gun, you pull the trigger. Do you shoot? I thought it was a great idea to buy that stock, so I just pulled the trigger. Sadly, I ended up losing half my money. So I took action. I had a great idea. I pulled the trigger, meaning I went ahead and did the idea, jumped in, and it failed and I lost a bunch. That's what I thought would happen with Bitcoin. I thought if I pulled the trigger, I'd get bad luck and it would go down. Emotionally, I felt that way.
Yeah, we thought it was more like Tulip mania, and if you've ever heard about this,
we have one more. Sorry
okay,
to
okay, we'll backtrack here and
backtrack a wee bit.
Okay, I'll give you another example of pulling the trigger. It looks like he was planning to propose to his girlfriend, but at the last minute he got nervous and couldn't pull the trigger. So he just didn't do it. In this case, he was nervous. He wanted to, but he just got nervous and couldn't do it.
Couldn't pull the trigger, couldn't propose, and now she's married to another guy. Sad story.
It doesn't say that in the on the paper, but I guess you know more than I.
I made the example. You never know. All right, Ad, you mentioned in the dialogue Tulip mania. It's a famous historical bubble a few hundred years ago in the Netherlands, I believe. People were paying crazy prices for tulips, a certain type of flower, and at the peak, at the high point of the bubble, some tulips were worth more than a house. Eventually, the bubble popped, and the tulip flowers were worth almost nothing, and a lot of people lost tons of money, and that's what Bitcoin kind of feels like when you have people rushing into some seemingly silly thing.
I kind of find that Tulip Mania made more sense. At least you got a nice rare tulip bulb at that time and
You got
something.
you got some unique special colored tulip or something, but it crashed. But anyway, we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. All right, bullish. This is the term when someone thinks something will increase a lot in value. So you can be bullish, like the animal, the bull. Bullish, so bearish, like a bear is the other way, you think it's going to go down. But bullish means you think it'll go up. So you can be bullish on stocks, on hot prices, on house prices, and on the economy in general. You think it's going to go up if you're bullish. You think it'll go down if you're bearish.
Yep, you can be bullish on Bitcoin, which the funny thing is, I'm kind of bullish on it because of so many things happening, but I just personally, I don't agree with it. And I think that's my problem why I didn't pull the trigger. Even though I saw people investing in it, so it would make sense why it would go up. I could have used that logic and then buy it. But I certainly didn't. I certainly did not think it was going to go to the moon, that's for sure. And this is a phrase that talks about some asset, like a stock, rising in value incredibly quickly. And in this case, we believe that Bitcoin did that very quickly. It went up, I don't know how many times, but a lot.
Yeah, you could say, I wish I held on to my Tesla stock before it went to the moon. It didn't go up as much as Bitcoin. I actually had some Tesla stock, I don't know, 2 years ago, and it went up maybe, it almost doubled. And I thought, oh, great, I'll just sell it now. Like, that was so smart. And it wasn't much. It was maybe $1,000 profit, and I got rid of it, but then it went up another, I don't know, 10 times and or something like that. And I didn't, well, no, I pulled the trigger to sell it, and I shouldn't have.
So yeah, you kind of got a bit too itchy with that finger and pulled it a bit too early. That
Yeah.
happens as well.
Well, just because you pull the trigger doesn't mean it works, just like with a gun. Could be a good idea, it's often a bad one.
It certainly seems like that at the moment. Next one, ultimately. And this is a good word that means in the end. And this is like a final destination. You could say something like, he is not sure where he will go to university, but I bet he'll ultimately end up close to home. That certainly happened in my case, in Andrew's case.
Yeah, so ultimately, in the end, whatever happens at the last thing. So it is sometimes a bit boring to eat only healthy foods, but ultimately, it's probably a good idea. That kind of means in the end, it's probably not a bad thing to eat healthy most of the time, even though it may be boring.
That sounds like a decent idea if you want to live a long and healthy life. If that's a good idea, I don't know.
Generally speaking, it is. Next one is my favorite one by far of the dialogue. And I even had to look up not what it meant, but where it came from. Peter out. So it is the man's name, Peter. And it's a common phrase that means if something peters out, it gets weak and small before disappearing completely. And it's an old phrase. They don't know exactly where it came from, but it could have been the religious figure Saint Peter, but the exact origin is unclear. I'm not sure how that relates to him, but I could say I wouldn't worry about that little fire. Everything is too wet near it. If you leave it alone, it will probably peter out. So it just kind of gets smaller and goes away. You can talk about a little wimpy fire going that way. And you hope it is. If you're out camping, you don't want it to burn down the forest.
Well, yeah, usually with fires, though, you're supposed to make sure that it's out and not just assume that it peters out. But I think we've all done it before. If it's contained enough that we let it peter out on its own.
Well, it was a good example of the term peter out is probably a bad example of fire safety. But anyway.
Yeah, I actually, when I was a child, I accidentally set my house on fire. That's a different story. We might have to save that for another dialogue. So I'm a bit sensitive when it comes to fire safety.
Apparently, yeah. Ad and I, well, we'll get into it later, but basically, we were about 5 and 7. I was 7, and Ad burned the house down. That's the short story, and we had to run out of the house and live somewhere else for 6 months. We'll save the other one. That is a good one to talk about, but literally that happened.
Yeah, that's the trailer for another episode. So we'll leave you on that note. Or we could say she was working out every day for the past few months. Then after a few days hanging out with friends, her motivation petered out and the workouts have been infrequent ever since. I've certainly seen that with people that go to the gym and then they certainly peter out and they never come back again.
Yeah, they're going strong in January because of the New Year's resolutions, and then peter out. A lot of people were hoping the virus would peter out, but it didn't. I was hoping it would peter out. Sometimes the wrong things peter out and the right ones don't.
Absolutely. Next one, ladder. And if there are two things said, the latter one is just the second one, and the former one is the first one. So if a waitress says, we have chocolate mousse for dessert, or if you like, we also have homemade strawberry ice cream and cherry pie, you could answer, I'll have the latter one, please, means just you want the second one, or in this case, it was the cherry pie, or the homemade strawberry ice cream with cherry pie.
I've never heard of that dessert, but it sounds not too bad with the two different fruits. But it's an easy way to refer to the second thing if you don't want to explain it all again. Just, I'll have the latter one. That means whatever you said at the end, I'll take that one.
Or if you're not listening to someone, I guess you can just say the latter if you just want to answer something.
Yeah, if you don't want to repeat it, it's easy. It's a good one. Very native. Last one, add camp. And in this context, there's more than one common way of thinking about a topic, or when there is, you can refer to each way of thinking as a camp, like a kid's camp kind of thing. Not kids, but I mean that word. It's like a school of thought, so a systematic way of thinking about something. So I could say something like, some doctors think that the healthiest way to eat is a high protein, low carb diet. Other experts think that a vegan diet is the way to go. Which camp are you in? So who do you agree with? Whose way of thinking do you agree with? So each one's kind of got their own little camp, their own group of people who think in a certain way.
It's funny when you're just discussing that little point. I don't even really know what camp I'm in. I just kind of eat meat. But I think the vegan camp sounds interesting if anyone's tried it. And if you are vegans, I'd love to hear more about it and switching over, at least trying it at some point.
I think most people are in the camp that eating late night bowls of ice cream and cereal and pizza and junk is not the way to go. On a secondary obvious point.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting camp if you if you disagree with that, I suppose.
You could say no one is in that camp, generally. Although they could say, and I'm stretching here, that it's healthy for the soul, so you can be happy at least, and that's a form of health. Some would say, not most.
I think you're reaching here, but that's a good way to finish the dialogue and talking about it. And hopefully we'll have a lot more interesting things to say. It's always fun, actually, having some opinions about a certain topic, and then you can look back and think, man, that was a bad idea, or we missed the boat. Like Bitcoin, maybe it'll go up another 10 times or it'll go down, and then we can talk about that later.
Yeah, it is. And these are going to be etched in YouTube forever, I guess, if they're still around. So, anyway, please like, subscribe, and comment. We love seeing you guys. Share it, the whole thing. The more this spreads around, the more likely we are to, the easier it will be to make them more quickly add.
And I guess the less likely they will be to peter out.
Oh, very true. Nice word. All right. Well, see you next week at Learn English 232 on YouTube.